Hello, in this video I'll show you how to make a classic cheesecake. I always start by preparing the base of the cheesecake first. To make the cheesecake crust, I combine 1.5 cups of graham cracker cookies, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 5 tablespoons of melted butter. There are many different types of cookies that you can use to create the crust for the cheesecake. I'm using gluten-free graham crackers, so my cheesecake will be gluten-free. The sugar that's added into the crust is basically just to taste, so based on the type of cookie you're using, you can increase or decrease the amount of sugar. The gluten-free graham crackers crush up really nicely, so I like to crush them inside the bag and then pour the bag into the cup. Then, if there's any large pieces of cracker, I can crush these up by hand. It's important that the crumbs are a pretty uniform size, and it's also important that they're small enough that everything will pack together well in the springform pan, because if they're too large, you'll have gaps between the pieces of cookie and your cheesecake batter could leak through. I stir together the crushed graham crackers, the sugar, and the melted butter, and then pack it into the springform pan. I pour about 2/3 to 3/4 of the graham cracker mixture into the bottom of the springform pan and use my hands to press this tightly into place. You can also use the back of a measuring cup. Once I have the base pressed down nice and solid, I take the rest of the mixture and press it into place around the edges of the pan. Once the crust is pressed into place, bake this in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 minutes. Alternatively, you can freeze this in the freezer for 15 minutes. However, I like the nutty flavors that come out from baking the crust for a few minutes. Now on to preparing the cheesecake batter. In a large mixing bowl, I add 4 packages of cream cheese. These are each 8 ounces, so I'm using a total of 32 ounces. Turn the mixer on to low or medium-low speed and start combining the cream cheese. It's very important that the cream cheese is at room temperature and that we mix the cream cheese before adding any ingredients in, because this is how you get a nice smooth batter without any lumps. If the cream cheese is cold or if we don't mix it before adding in sugar, you're introducing the possibility to have a lumpy cheesecake. Once the plain cheesecake is smooth, wipe down the edges of a bowl with a rubber spatula and then add in the sugar. I add 1 1/4 cup of sugar. Then I mix the sugar in with the cream cheese until it's smooth. Again, I'm only using low to medium-low speed for this, because if I go too fast with the mixer, I'll actually be whipping air into the batter, and this is one of the factors that can cause cheesecake to crack. Next, I add in the sour cream. I use a 1/2 cup plus of sour cream, so basically I fill a 1/2 cup full of sour cream, but I don't level it flat. Recipes can call for anywhere from a 1/4 cup to 2/3 cup sour cream. This is really just to taste, but the tanginess of the sour cream really helps balance out the flavor of the cheesecake. Then I add in a 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla and a 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice. I add these 3 ingredients in at the same time, and then again I stir and mix everything together. The reason that I'm mixing in stages is so that each of the ingredients can be well incorporated without making the cheesecake lumpy. I found that if I add everything at the same time, it doesn't make as smooth of a cheesecake batter. It's important that the sour cream is also at room temperature when we add it into the batter, because if it's colder than the cream cheese, it can actually make the cream cheese temperature drop as well and can introduce lumps. Next, I'm going to add in 4 large eggs. However, I don't add the eggs directly into the mix. Instead, I crack all 4 eggs into a bowl and then stir the eggs together with a fork. I stir slowly so that I'm again trying not to put any air into the eggs, and then I will pour this mixture slowly into the cheesecake batter. It's important that the eggs are also at room temperature for 2 reasons. The first is the same reason that we needed the sour cream at room temperature, which is just so it doesn't decrease the temperature of the other ingredients in the bowl and cause lumps. The second reason is because eggs stir together better at room temperature, so we won't have to worry about overmixing the eggs or adding too much air. I turn the mixer on to low speed and then pour in a little bit of the mixed eggs at a time. Once those eggs have incorporated into the batter, then I'll pour in a little bit more. Each time after I add in the eggs, I wait a little bit to make sure that it's well incorporated. I'm still mixing on low to medium-low speed to make sure that I'm not whipping air into the batter. There's so many different cheesecake recipes out there, and different recipes call for a different number of eggs. I prefer to use 4 eggs, but I've also seen successful recipes that use 5. The amount of egg that we use in the cheesecake batter matters because the egg yolk helps to provide the rich flavor, and the egg is the binding agent because this cheesecake is made without flour and starch, so it helps hold everything together. However, having too many eggs can also cause the cheesecake to crack. As the cheesecake cooks, the proteins in the batter are going to constrict, which can cause cracking. The more eggs that we use, the more protein is going to be in the batter and the higher chance for cracking. One way that we can combat this is by using a water bath. The water in the water bath will never go above 212 degrees Fahrenheit because then it will turn to gas. This keeps the cheesecake that's touching the water bath from not going above 212 degrees Fahrenheit too. This allows us to use low heat to fully cook the eggs so that the proteins don't go into shock and constrict. I recommend using a water bath to cook the cheesecake for the reason I just discussed and for a few more reasons. Since I'll be using a water bath and I'm using a springform pan, I need to wrap the pan in aluminum foil so that it won't leak and fill with water. Once the baked cheesecake crust has cooled, I wrap it in the heavy-duty aluminum foil. I prefer to use 3 layers to wrap the pan. I put the first layer of aluminum foil on and press it tightly up against the springform pan. Then I'm going to rotate the pan 90 degrees and put another layer on. This way, anywhere that I have seams from the short side of the aluminum foil will now be covered by a longer piece of aluminum foil. I rotate the pan again to put on the 3rd layer of aluminum foil. I'm also trying to center the pan on each piece of aluminum foil so that the aluminum foil will come up about an equal amount all the way around the pan. I place the prepared springform pan into the roasting pan that will hold my water bath before I add in the cheesecake batter. This will help to make sure that I don't spill any batter. I also look for the lowest point of the aluminum foil around the springform pan. That way it will be facing me when I put the roasting rack into the oven. Then I pour my cheesecake batter into the springform pan. I placed the roast pan with the filled springform pan in it into the oven before I add the water for the water bath. If I added the water first, I would need to be very careful not to spill any of the water while moving the roast pan. This helps make sure that I don't get water into the cheesecake. I use near boiling water from my tea kettle and pour this into the roast pan. The water needs to be at least an inch deep all the way around the springform pan, and it shouldn't come more than halfway up the sides of the cheesecake. I typically pour the water to at least half an inch below the lowest point of my aluminum foil wrap. This is because the water will be boiling around the cheesecake, and I need to make sure that any of the bubbles don't splash water into the aluminum foil wrapping. Then I bake the cheesecake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 55 to 70 minutes. The outer 2 inches of the cheesecake should be firm and set, and the inside of the cheesecake should jiggle slightly, but it shouldn't be so jiggly that it's bouncy. When I look at the cheesecake here, I don't think it's quite done yet, so I let it cook for another 5 minutes. I'll also mention here the other 2 reasons that the water bath is great for cooking cheesecake. As the water boils, it evaporates into steam, which makes the entire oven moist. This moisture prevents the cheesecake from drying out, which in turn would cause cracking. Additionally, the cooler temperature of the water compared to the temperature of the oven prevents the outside edges of the cheesecake from burning before the inside of the cheesecake is able to cook. Once the cheesecake is done cooking, I take the springform pan out of the roast pan and place it back into the oven with the oven off and with the door cracked. I let the cheesecake cool like this for 30 to 45 minutes before taking it out of the oven and letting it rest on the counter. This method of cooling allows the cheesecake to go through more gradual temperature changes, which helps us to keep the proteins from the eggs and from the milk that's in the cheesecake from going into shock. Once the cheesecake is cooled to room temperature, I remove the layers of aluminum foil. You can see that my outermost layer of aluminum foil did collect some water, mostly from the boiling water that boiled into this layer. However, the second and the first layer of aluminum foil were completely dry. Then I cover the cheesecake in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge to cool for at least 4 more hours. Once the cheesecake is fully cooled, I remove it from the springform pan. To do this, I run a knife under hot water and then dry the knife off with a paper towel. Then I press the knife between the edge of the graham cracker crust and the inner edge of the Springform pan. I cut all the way around the pan, and then I unlatch it and lift the edges of the pan away from the cheesecake. I prefer to keep the cheesecake on the Springform pan base. That way, if we don't eat it all, we can put it back into the fridge easily. So I just place the cheesecake up onto a cake stand. However, if you want to remove it from the base as well, just slide some heavy-duty spatulas underneath it and lift it off. To smooth out any of the rough edges that the knife might have caused, you can dip your finger into some water and gently pat those edges down. The cheesecake is so silky and soft, so I just use a butter knife to cut through it. I make sure to cut all the way down to the crust to take a slice out. Each cheesecake slice is also pretty heavy, so make sure to use an appropriate utensil to lift it out of the base. You can enjoy the cheesecake plain or top it with caramel, chocolate, or your favorite fruity sauce. I made a quick blackberry sauce to top for this cheesecake. Thanks for watching this video on how to make a classic cheesecake. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe to see more content.